Welcome everyone to this evening's program, where we're going to spend the next 50 minutes or so looking at the US election, its impact on American Jewry and on Israel. My name is Dan Sacker. I'm a proud member of Hendon United Synagogue, grew up in the wonderful Belmont United Synagogue, studied politics in Washington, worked in PR and political lobbying, and then joined the office of the chief rabbi in 2011. And in 2013, I transitioned with Rabbi Sachs to run his private office. A while ago, I also made the mistake of being good friends with David Collins, the Chief Programs Officer at the United Synagogue, and he asked me to moderate tonight's conversation. And he did also tell me not to make the event, quote, too political, but I assume he meant in terms of endorsing a particular candidate. Otherwise, we're all about to fail spectacularly. So what's the outcome of this election? What does it mean for America, for American Jewry, and for Israel? And I'm delighted to be joined by a great panel to discuss these issues. And I'm hoping that I won't need to use any kind of mute button, as none of them are actually candidates for President of the United States. So first we have Nathan Diamond. Nathan is the Executive Director of the Orthodox Union, of the Advocacy Center of the Orthodox Union, where he develops and coordinates public policy research and initiatives on behalf of the American Orthodox Jewish community. The OU is in many ways.
Dan's sound.
You just lost sound.
Oh, now you're back.
So the OU is in many ways similar to the United Synagogue. It works with synagogues, youth, and kashrut and many other issues. I've had the pleasure of knowing Nathan for many, many years, and he's always been one of my go-to guys for all things American politics. Rabbi Shul Robinson has been senior rabbi at the Lincoln Square Synagogue since 2005, one of New York's largest and most prestigious synagogues. Originally from Glasgow, Rabbi Robinson worked for the Union of Jewish Students and as a student chaplain in Cambridge before being appointed as rabbi of Barnet United Synagogue in 1997. He's a highly respected voice within the American rabbinate, wider American Jewry and beyond, as well as internationally through his always thoughtful posts online. Sivan Rahav Meir is one of Israel's top media commentators, making regular appearances on Israeli TV, radio, and in print, offering her insights into both the local and international political scene. She spent last year living in America with her family, where she served as the World Mizrahi Shlicha, so has a great understanding of the community there and in Israel. She's also very well known to the United Synagogue members as a wonderful Torah teacher through her lectures, WhatsApp messages, which have been read by thousands of Jews all over the world. So thank you all for being here. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Nathan, I want to start with you if I can. I was reading David Brooks's latest column in the New York Times over the weekend, and I was struck by some really stark findings in a study that he quoted by the Institute of Advanced Studies in Culture. And he said, and here are three things. He said, 66% of Americans believe America is in decline. He said 82% of Biden voters believe that Trump wants to gradually transform America into a dictatorship. And 90% of Trump voters believe Biden wants to gradually turn America into a socialist society. So I guess my question is, how bad is it?
A historian could probably give a more in-depth answer to that than I can. I've read that there were elections in the 1800s that were absolutely awful, but this is certainly an incredibly divisive and polarized campaign, certainly the most divisive and polarized, I would say, in the last 25 years. I mean, the best evidence of that are the kinds of statistics you just cited, Dan. The fact that the campaign slogan for Vice President Biden is "This is a battle for the soul of the United States," and President Trump has also been invoking that kind of, absolute rhetoric. It's a function, I think, sadly, of a broader problem in society beyond, the realm of politics, which is people living in their echo chambers where the things they read online or in their Facebook feeds or whatever, media tend to be things that reinforce and reaffirm their perspective rather than expose them to other ideas. So things are very divided. and it's pretty, and it's a pretty intense campaign as a result.
And I mean, you look at the polling numbers, and they would tend to say that Biden is ahead nationally in terms of the overall vote. But we know that polling numbers are not necessarily always the most reliable thing, certainly when it comes to American politics. So how much should we be paying attention to those? How much should we be looking at those as indicators of what's going to happen during the night?
Right. Well, I think it's important for the British audience to know that while national polls are indicative or informative, we don't run a national election for president. We run a whole bunch of state elections because the way the framers of the Constitution set up the system is there's an intermediary which we call the Electoral College. So when people go into their voting booth in New York or Texas or California or Oklahoma, wherever, they're technically voting for electors. There's people who are pledged to then in turn vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden when the Electoral College meets in several weeks to formally elect the president. And so that's why you'll see maps. That's why you'll see discussions about battleground states. Right, everybody basically knows New York and California are voting for the Democrat. Everybody knows that that Oklahoma, and Wyoming are voting for the Republican. So you get to a handful of states which are really close, really closely divided, and you'll see the magic number is 270. That gets a candidate a majority of the electoral votes, and that's what it'll take to win. So the national polls can sort of give you an overall trend, but you really need to look at the state by state polls, especially in these battlegrounds. And I'll refer the viewers to a good website over here called realclearpolitics.com, which has interactive maps and things that you can look at if you're so inclined, and will give you averages. It's also, as you said, polls can be flawed. So people tend to look at, let's say look at Florida. Don't just look at one poll. Look at what the average of the polls have been of several polls over a period of time. That gives you a better trend line. That all being said, what we've seen in this race for literally months is at the national level and in battleground states, generally Joe Biden with, a lead. But today, election day, is really not just the litmus test for that lead. It's also the Biden campaign and the Democrats have really taken advantage of or been maximizing people voting early in this election over the past week or two, either by early voting, which is allowed in a number of states, or by mail-in ballots, which more people than ever have done because of the pandemic, among other reasons. And the Republicans and President Trump have really put their chips on their voters turning out in massive, unprecedented numbers on the day, today, on election day. So that lead that the polls indicate, we'll have to see, is that the lead that stays in place through a potential massive turnout of Republican pro-Trump voters today, or have the Democrats banked, enough votes ahead of time that even if their numbers on election day are lower, the Republicans who are voting and others who are voting for Trump cannot overcome that lead.
And for those of us in Britain who obviously are staying up through the night, and I'm sure there are hundreds of viewers who are going to be doing that. Well, I will be. I don't know about the other 100 of viewers. Are there certain states, or you mentioned the battleground states, but are there certain things to look for that give you an indication of how the wider map is gonna play out?
Yeah. So the good news for the people in England is that there are a number of East Coast states, earlier that are only 5 hours off from British time. So Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina, and Ohio, for that matter, will all close their polls between 7 and 7:30 Eastern time. And how those are battleground states, and if those states, for example, all go for Biden, it's basically impossible for Trump to win. If they start splitting, they'll be in for a longer night or early morning. A lot of folks, if they've been following the coverage, have seen Pennsylvania as a crucial state. But if we're waiting for Pennsylvania, it appears at this point we're going to be waiting for days, if not weeks, because the Pennsylvania state legislature has put in place that all these early ballots that I talked about, the absentee ballots, the mail-in ballots, are not going to be allowed to be even looked at before a few days after Election Day. Whereas in a state like Florida, they've already been counting the absentee and the early ballots. So when they get to the polls closing tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern, they're going to have already counted their absentee ballots. They'll count their day of ballots, and you'll actually basically get the result from Florida. Whereas again, Pennsylvania is going to take longer. Pennsylvania might not end up being the deciding state, so that would make that whole saga, moot. The one other state I would tell people to keep an eye on if they've stayed up all night, which I'm not advising, go to bed. You can wake up early in the morning British time, and you'll be fine. But Arizona, if the East Coast is splitting in various ways, Arizona, which will close at 7 o'clock, but that's 7 o'clock Arizona time, which is 2 or 3 hours later, could be a decisive state.
And Rabbi Robinson, if I can come to you, we over here in Britain have seen just in the past few days sort of the publication of the Equality and Human Rights Commission report into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and we've seen the impact that political parties can have on the climate within society for the Jewish community. There was a publication by the American Jewish Committee that came out, I think last week or something, that sort of spoke about the state of anti-Semitism in America. And it said 88% of respondents say that anti-Semitism is either somewhat or a very serious problem in America. 82% think that it's increased a lot or somewhat in the past 5 years. And my question really is, how much of that do you think has been due to the political climate? And I guess the secondary part to that is, we saw the impact of a progressive left on a political party within the UK. There's been a lot of chat about the impact of the progressive left within the Democrat Party as well. Should Biden become president? So taking all those things sort of into account, how much of the rise that there's been in anti-Semitism has been because of the political climate, and how concerned are the community about the impact of that progressive left on the Democrat Party as a whole?
Those are amazing questions, Dan. First of all, thank you to United Synagogue. Thank you and for having me on, and I really appreciate it. This is my first American election as a voter. I'm going out
congratulations. I'm not sure which one.
I already hope to have I have voted sticker. They make here it's like getting your first pair of shoes. You get a sticker, you get a lot of congratulations. And it's thrilling to be able to participate in what is, despite everything that, not despite, as well as everything that Nathan said, so presently is absolutely true about this crazy, difficult election season. Still, there's a sense of excitement in the air that this is democracy, and still a functioning democracy, and a great democracy at that, and a monumental election. And if I might just take one very quick second to ask you, Dan, on behalf of my entire community, really American Jewish community, to convey to Rabbi Sachs, on behalf of all of us, our sincere prayers for his refuah shalem. I know how close you are personally with him, and we're all davening right now for his full refuah. Elections like this show how desperately needed his voice and his political ideas were. Rabbi Sachs was running for president of the United States of America. We would not have any of these difficulties. There's no question about it. But you ask a very, very important question about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States of America. There's no question about it. Unlike the last election in the UK, and I remember election night very, very well, and I remember how anxious it was as the polls looked like they were tightening towards the end. Anti-Semitism was an election issue in the 2019 British election. And you'll know the Chief Rabbi's intervention, and it became an issue. It became a massive, massive issue. That is not the case here in America. Political extremism on the left and on the right, and depending on which the way you consume your news, you're either concerned about, rising extremists on the left, Antifa, part of the Black Lives movement, not the statement, not the idea that Black lives indeed matter, but parts of the hardcore movement that are extremely left-wing and bring in all sorts of associated political ideologies. And of course, on the right, white supremacists. Over Donald Trump's term, we have seen a rise in anti-Semitism from the left and the right. We have seen Pittsburgh. We have seen Jersey City. We've seen anti-Semitism, violent, murderous anti-Semitism perpetrated in the Jewish community, directed at the Jewish community in all sorts of small, violent ways and all sorts of murderous ways come from the left and the right. So there's a rise in political extremism, which is a sign of a greater seizing up of both a sense of a common good in this country, which is very hard to find right now, and a sense of extreme ideologies, conspiracy theories being allowed to run riot through the political domain. But thank God, anti-Semitism is not an issue in the election. I would say, looking at the Democratic Party, and there's every reason to be concerned about trends from rising trends to the left and the right, without America in many ways has become a sort of a tired country. It's allowed the political establishment. It is allowed, particularly after the financial crisis and others, cynicism has taken over from ideology. And therefore, both on the right and the left, either radical ideas or politically disestablishment ideas. Trump on the right and what they call the squad on the left have been able to make the running because established political parties don't have a coherent view anymore of the public good and offer the public a vision. We have every right to be concerned about rising, I would say, anti-Israel sentiment with some degree of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories coming from the hard left. But it is not. We're not talking about a Stalinist hard left, ideology of the kind that gave rise to and was reflected by the kind of naked anti-Semitism you saw in the British Labour Party. So that is, so it's not as bad. Is probably the best thing I could say. But anti-Semitism is extremely concerning. There's no doubt about it. And when you hear, God forbid, of a Jew that happened in our neighborhood yesterday, there was a kind of anti-Semitic verbal abuse outside one of our local schools. And my first question was it from a right wing or was it from the left wing? And you genuinely don't know at this moment in America who is potentially smashing windows in a synagogue and who's daubing graves and who's pushing Hasidim over in the street. That's the sad reality of anti-Semitism right now in America, that is coming from right and left.
And Sivan, I think sort of this idea of extremism within political parties. I mean, tomorrow, according to by the English calendar, is the 25th anniversary of the murder of Yitzhak Rabin, the assassination of Rabin, and he was obviously one of the great personalities of Israeli politics. Whether you agreed with his politics is put to one side. He was undoubtedly one of the great figures. And politics nowadays, even in the UK or in America or in Israel, is becoming an increasingly individual subject. You elect the person, whether you're supposed to be electing the party or not. You look at the leader. And there was a poll that was published yesterday by the Israel Democracy Institute that sort of asked the Israeli public who was the preferred candidate. And 70% said Trump, and 13% said Biden, and 42% said that the Israel-US relationship was going to weaken under a Biden administration. So I guess my question to you, looking at it from Israel, and obviously America and Israel are such key allies, how much of that relationship is based on personality? How much of it is based on values? And in recent weeks, have we seen a maybe cooling of the tightness of Bibi and Trump on the basis that perhaps he's thinking, well, no one's sure what's going to happen? What's the view from Israel?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, shalom from Yerushalayim. Thank you, Dan, Nathan, Rabbi Robinson. Toda Rabba. Thank you for organizing that event. And in the middle of the day, I speak in Hebrew about the elections all day. I host a few shows on Israeli TV, but speaking from London to New York, something different. And I will try to explain our perspective. But first of all, I must say, I heard, the way you speak about anti-Semitism. For me as an Israeli, I can't even agree. It became like a subject, and yeah, we should live with it. In your community, Rabbi Robinson, in London, in France, we should, get along. We should understand it's part of our life. And maybe, I'm too Israeli, seventh generation Israeli. But when we moved to the States as World Mizrachi Shlichim a year ago, I was shocked to realize people see it as part of their life. Yeah, oh, there's a swastika in our neighborhood. Oh, never mind. Yeah, someone just said dirty Jew. And I'm polite when I quote, those words. Something awful about Jews. Yeah, it's part of the American way of living today. I think I can't, I disagree to see it as part of your life. And I remember the first time I was in the States and I was invited to a panel about anti-Semitism, an evening with Barry Weiss and other experts. And I remember my son, he's 8 years old. He said, "Mommy, what do you do tonight?" I said, once when I used to leave home, now I'm just sitting here in front of the camera speaking to myself and the kids are here. But once we have events, we had panels. So I left the house in New York and he said, "So Mommy, what's the topic tonight?" And I said, anti-Semitism. And he said, "Mommy, maze antisemiyut? What is anti-Semitism?" And I thought it's so exciting. He's an Israeli kid. He has no idea what it is, Baruch Hashem. And we created a place when there is no anti-Semitism. Obviously, there should be no anti-Semitism in the whole world. But I just want to tell you as an Israeli, how I feel when you discuss it as part of your life. Yeah, increasing, decreasing, but I can't accept that fact. Okay, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm weird, but I believe the situation is quite weird. Now, let's try to answer your question. I'm not a politician. I want to answer the question you asked. And 70% of the Israelis, yeah, they support Trump. I'm surprised. I thought 100% of the Israelis.
Me too. Yeah.
And I mean, for you, maybe it's weird. You must understand our angle, our point of view, since we're Israelis, and make Israel great again. Israel comes first. All those slogans are true when it comes to your beloved Jewish state. And what he did for us in those, I know, I can support Trump without supporting Trumpism. I can support the things he did, and I'm shocked. I'm surprised to see what he achieved in 4 years as an Israeli. You remember Nikki Haley, the hero he sent to the UN? What a change! What a new spirit! People here admired her. By the way, I think she can be a great candidate. We recommend you, the Americans, of new other names maybe for the future. Rabbi Sachs, Nikki Haley, but.
I'm going to rule Rabbi Sachs out of the running as his official spokesman and all that. So.
Okay, no. His spirit is what we need right now. Something that looks for the common denominator. But anyway, it began with Nikki Haley and the embassy and the Golan Heights and the Iranian, the Iranian weapon, and now 3 peace agreements. You must understand the Israeli perspective. We're not so narrow-minded. We just get so many gifts, so many presents after 8 years. I remember covering the Obama administrations. Every day I woke up asking myself, I was the reporter here in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. Every day we woke up asking, okay, what did we do wrong? I mean, what are we, why are we, what's our fault again? So we build here, there's a beautiful neighborhood here in Yerushalayim called Ramot. There's a new, I would say, street built in Ramot, a neighborhood. You can disagree with that fact. You can say that's the crucial problem of the Middle East right now, okay? Look around you. That's it's not fair. So the proportions changed. We're not the problem anymore, but we're part of the solution. And that's why the Israelis ignore other things they dislike, okay? And they do see that policy. Just think about it, okay? Imagine he will continue, and imagine 3 peace agreements with other Arab states. For us, it's like a dream. So I do understand the Israelis. I do feel we should work hard in order to make, to change the Democratic Party. We just read on Shabbat, "V'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpechot ha'adama," not just the Republicans, okay? Our message means something to the whole world, not just to the Republican Party. And yeah, it's part of our mission here in Israel.
So then, I mean, role play for a minute. How does Bibi, who had such a hostile relationship with the Obama administration, primarily due to Iran, but there was also personality politics going on there as well. Biden was obviously an integral part of that administration. If Biden gets elected, then how does Bibi deal with that? How does he approach it?
Okay, I just read a few commentators here in Israel claiming Netanyahu wants Biden to win. It's quite weird, but in a way, it will make him stronger. Since now he has an enemy, we must have a strong prime minister. He already did it with Obama. Give him the opportunity to now do it with the new enemy. I don't want to call Biden an enemy, God forbid, but let him do that hard work. He knows how to do it. So in a way, I don't think personally Netanyahu will be so miserable. Okay, it's politics. And yeah, those two, Netanyahu and Trump are good friends, and they will continue, even afterwards. I believe, by the way, Trump and Netanyahu are just personalities. No one here is the Mashiach, and nothing is, forever happen. And in a way, in Israel, our politics is focused on Netanyahu. I call it to Bibi or not to Bibi. That's like, one day in 10 years, Netanyahu will not lead Israel. Trump will not lead America. Our story is much wider and larger and longer than those candidates. So I appreciate them. I want them to be successful and help the Jewish nation, help the whole world. But I believe they will get along. I believe Biden is not as extreme as Obama. I believe he always quotes, how he worked with Golda Meir. So I believe we will have a friend at the end of the day. Bottom line, we will have a friend in the White House, whoever wins tonight. So I'm not as worried as some of the writers here in Israel. It's always a catastrophe. When you read the news, it's always extreme. So Bezrat Hashem, drink here.
L'chaim.
It's gonna be okay.
It's gonna be fine. Nathan, you can hear me because you were clicking on and off. I just want to check. Okay, excellent. So I just want to drill down a bit into the American vote, the American Jewish vote a bit, because there are polls that have been, again, polls and everything, but it would seem that the Jewish vote as a whole splits about 3-1, give or take a little bit, in favor of Biden. And yet when you look within the Orthodox community, it's the reverse. It's even greater than the reverse. I think the UMI magazine did a poll in mid-October that sort of said 83% of the readers of UMI, okay, it's UMI magazine, but 83% were voting for Trump. So I guess my question is, if you could explain to us a little bit about why there's this, this change between the wider American Jewish vote and the Orthodox American Jewish vote.
Sure. So this is not a new thing that started with Trump. You can look, if you look, we've actually tracked, the divergence between the Orthodox Jewish community's vote and the rest of the American Jewish community's vote since 2000. Okay, so it's no surprise that when Joe Lieberman was on the Democratic ticket in 2000, that not only did the Democratic ticket overwhelmingly win the Jewish vote in general, they won the Orthodox, segment of that vote overwhelmingly as well. But then you start with 2004, George W. Bush's reelection, and every cycle since, you've seen, that again, American Jews broadly in the non-Orthodox segments of the community are overwhelmingly Democratic, and the Orthodox Jews have been consistently voting in the majority. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but a majority for the Republican nominee. And look, I think, it's frankly, it is about Israel. It is about the fact that while many American Jews who are not Orthodox have Israel among their priorities, it's not necessarily their foremost priority. They're concerned about, first of all, Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews are obviously concerned about everything that lots of Americans are concerned about: COVID, healthcare, tax policy, what have you. But non-Orthodox American Jews, if you look at the American Jewish Committee surveys or various other, do not consistently rank Israel as their foremost priority. Plus, so the ones who are concerned about Israel, whatever that means, first of all, might have different views than, say, Likud party views about what's good for Israel or what it means to be pro-Israel. And then also, if you have a Democratic candidate, whether it's John Kerry in 2004 or Barack Obama, subsequently, or Hillary Clinton, none of them is running on an anti-Israel platform, right? They're all saying that they are friends of Israel, but they have a view that, Israel needs to, and you can take them at their word if, to genuinely be saying, we are friends of Israel. We think it's in Israel's best interest to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians, and we think the two-state solution is the best way to do it. So that's what we want to do with Israel in partnership, and so on and so forth. So for these Jews, American Jews, who are inclined to vote Democrat anyway because of their whole other list of issues, they are basically reassured on Israel that this is not somebody who's hostile, so they can vote for that Democrat. The Orthodox Jewish community in the United States puts a much higher weight, or a much greater weight, on Israel in general, and also tends to have what in the Israeli political context would be called more right-wing views with regard to the issues. That's a function of having attended day school in yeshivot, where they're learning Tanakh and reading about all the events that occur there, which are occurring not in Tel Aviv but are occurring in Yehuda and Shomron. They've spent themselves, or have sent their kids to learn in yeshivot and seminaries in Israel for a year or two or more. They have family that are there. They're visiting Israel more frequently pre-COVID, and Mirz Hashem post-COVID, than any other segment of America. So they're much more deeply attached to Israel, and so that combination of that deeper attachment and the higher prioritization, and again, what on the Israeli political spectrum would be considered more right-wing, views, puts the Orthodox voter more in the camp of the Republican candidates in recent years than the Democratic candidates.
And to what extent is there sort of Sivan?
I just want to say something about those Jews. We speak about them all the time. The majority of the Jews in America, the priorities, Israel is not it's okay. I mean, I don't want them to vote for Trump. It's not like my thing. I want them to be more connected. In a way, I'm worried about their connection to Israel. I think what you're doing, by the way, OU, Nathan, and obviously Lincoln Square Synagogue, we've been there. We saw what you're doing. It's so important to reach out to them, not because they should vote for Judah and Samaria, because they should be connected. They should visit Israel. They should know a little bit of Hebrew, a little bit of Torah. And I'm worried, in 2 generations, will they even identify themselves as Jews? All those polls, all those surveys, okay? Or will there only be Orthodox Jews supporting the right? And I think our mission, not just every 4 years speaking about how liberal and progressive they became, it's our mission to be in touch with them, throughout the year. I know how much you do it, but I think it's our global mission in a way. And not because I want them to vote for a certain candidate, because I want them to be connected. And assimilation, it's a word, it's not politically correct, maybe, using that word, but I think it's one of the Jewish problem in America, much more than who do you vote? That's not the question. Who do you marry? That's the question.
Yeah, but I think that's absolutely true, and the connection is there. But a lot of the connection, unfortunately, is seen through the prism of politics. So some of the things that you were talking about earlier, with the embassy and the recognition of the Golan Heights, all of these things that are so many people would say are fundamental to the whole relationship. I think things like that. Nathan, are those things going to remain if there's a change in the White House? Are those things now set in stone? The embassy, the Golan Heights, the recognition, things like that, or is there a chance that those things might slide?
Look, nothing is set in stone in this context. Look, if you go down the list, so Biden has clearly said on the record, he thinks that Trump totally withdrawing from the JCPOA, right, the Iran nuclear deal, was a mistake, because he believes that actually removed restrictions on Iran, and Iran is making more trouble now, and Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons technology more now than they would have under the deal. You can agree or disagree with that, but that's Biden's position. And what he has said is he's not going to just re-enter the deal, on January 21st as though nothing has happened, but he wants to re-engage with Iran, renegotiate, and negotiate a new deal, what he would say will be a stronger, more effective deal. So that's on the Iran front. With regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he's for the two-state solution as an ultimate model of some kind of resolving that for the long-term interests of Israeli security, and what he would say is for the rights of the Palestinian people. But he and his advisors also recognize what is the state of Palestinian leadership. I don't think they are under such illusions as to say, oh, all of a sudden again on January 21st we're going to have a peace summit in Washington and we're going to work everything out. But they're going to try to re-engage both the Israeli leadership and the Palestinian leadership in ways that move towards negotiations. Do I think, I don't think he has said on the record, his position on the embassy. I would be very surprised for him to say, we're pulling up stakes in Jerusalem and moving the embassy back to Tel Aviv. What they're more likely to do is reopen an American consulate in East Jerusalem, which will serve as sort of the de facto, office to deal with the Palestinian leadership. I don't think he said anything about the Golan Heights. I don't know, frankly. I don't have a sense of what they may or may not do with regard to the Golan Heights. They're obviously not going to try to undo, normalization agreements with UAE, Bahrain, et cetera. And that's, I think, the most interesting question, which we've spoken to some Biden advisors about, but in the middle of a campaign, you don't really get too far into deep discussions on. The fact of the matter is that the landscape, the chessboard, so to speak, is not the same as it was in 2009 when Obama and Biden came into office, right? You have these normalization agreements. And so even on, the quote unquote, peace process agenda, the Israeli-Palestinian agenda, from the American perspective, they have to account for the fact that while the reality in the Palestinian leadership has not changed, one bit in 8 years or 4 years, the reality of Israel's relationships with other Arab countries is different. So how does that relate to how you're engaging with the Palestinian issue? That is an open question. I would just direct your readers, or the viewers on this point, if they're interested, on the JTA news website several days ago, they published a well-reported account of Biden's role during the Obama administration with regard to Israel issues, and what positions did Biden take inside the administration during those years. So that might be something for folks to look at while they're brewing their kettle once again in the middle of the night.
Rabbi Robinson, I'd like to I'll ask you something connected to the whole political thing, but maybe from a more, as the only rabbi on the panel, I'm gonna sort of direct this to you. Last week I read an interview. There was quite a big interview in Makor Rishon in Israel with Rav Moshe Lichtenstein from Yeshivat Har Etzion, where he was talking about President Trump, and he said, quote, that he doesn't recognize the concepts of truth and falsehood, and he warned that his actions will, quote, harm us even if there is an embassy in Jerusalem. Right? So I guess my question, I'm not asking you to pass comment or judgment on those specifically, but I think the question is more broadly about sort of the interplay within Judaism of values and policy and morality and politics, and how sort of, I mean, you have this discussion the whole time within the context of Israel as a Jewish state and with democratic values, and some things work well and some things work less well. But it's interesting to kind of have that discussion within the context of an American election, when kind of those moral issues have been so much at the forefront of the campaign. So I just kind of wondered what you felt, given that you're a communal rabbi. I'm sure there's quite a diverse range of opinions within your community, and how you kind of manage that division when it comes to sort of morality versus politics.
Look, the question is extremely important, and I want to address it actually in light of both what Nathan and Sivan had to say originally about it. Also touches very much on connections or questions of Jewish identity and relationship between Jewish values. And although Nathan and you quoted from Ami magazine differences between Orthodox and non-Orthodox community, where I sit as a rabbi of a modern Orthodox community and also a rabbi of a modern Orthodox community, which is very diverse in the way the Upper West Side of Manhattan is, and through social media, friends, and there should actually be a status on Facebook where you can become somebody's enemy on Facebook as opposed to somebody's friend on Facebook, because that seems to happen a lot as well. In the modern Orthodox community, there is a split that is not just age to a large extent, but is also ideological in terms of issues around this question. It actually is even reflecting the way that people are looking at Israel as well. People in the modern Orthodox community who are disgusted with Donald Trump, kind of no favor or slack at all, and as a result, to a certain extent, may become somewhat politically cool towards Israel's embrace. So it's a very, very, very complicated question. Anybody who thinks, and I'm afraid that there are people in the Orthodox community, the ultra-Orthodox community, who thinks that Donald Trump is a man of good character, is clearly fooling themselves. You would not want Donald Trump, as I say, as a father of 5 daughters, to date your daughter. You would not. He is not a morally good person, and there's no question about it. And more than that, if, for example, Bill Clinton, with everything we know about him now, was standing as a candidate in this election versus a regular Republican, the Orthodox community would be calling out issues of morality from the rooftops. All you would be hearing from many rabbis would be, you cannot vote for a person of such disgusting moral character. That is kind of the partisan nature. Good friends of mine have called this an act of assimilation, that we have put aside our Jewish values about the way we look at leaders and instead have imported into our value system or our priority system also the politics and the partisan nature of the day. That's not to say that there are many Orthodox Jews who, for good reason, will vote today, if they haven't already done so, for Donald Trump. But it's a matter of tremendous frustration to me. And it's a matter that is literally driving some people out of the Orthodox community, that the Orthodox enthusiasm for Donald Trump does not recognize, seeks to ignore the fact that this is a person who does not in any way stand for our values. His court statements and personal life are the opposite of our values. Again, one may make a pragmatic decision based on economy, based on Israel, based on lots of things, based on fear of rising extremism in the left, that you hold your nose and vote Republican. But to the extent that this point of morality has simply been elided and overlooked, is something which is causing a crisis of faith in the Orthodox community. I have to say, without belaboring this point, Dan mentioned, and I second guess myself all the time, Facebook posts where I genuinely try to be, and I'm hardly the only rabbi who tries to be, look, we're all friends, let's all be, there are two sides to this question. I posted a point that I posed the other day, which basically said that there are people who I respect, and I consider myself my rabbi, my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Moshe Lichtenstein. I consider him both my Rav and a personal friend of mine. There are people who absolutely feel, like Rav Moshe wrote, that there is no excusing the bad behavior of Donald Trump, and the embassy and the Jerusalem is not worth the exchange. There are other people who look at it differently. I respect people who today are voting Republican, and I respect people who today are voting Democrats. I have leaders, teachers, people I would trust with life and death decisions in my own life who are on different sides of the aisle. In reaction to that particular post, I received an email from a young man who grew up in our community who basically said, and I'm looking for who basically said, I'm writing with deep disappointment. Voting for Donald Trump can neither be squared with sane morality or any form of Judaism that I want to be part of. Equally, in result of a Dvar Torah that I said the other day about Abraham, a world on flames, looking for the injustice in the world and reacting to it, a right-leaning person wrote to me to say, how dare you say this world is in flames? It's all left-wing propaganda. The virus is overstated. Trump is doing a great job. Enough with the left-wing panic. So we are a community that has lost its mind, has an inability, and that's an act of assimilation because America has lost its mind to a certain extent, at least in public or social media channels. We're no longer able to speak rationally or with respect to each other. It is a huge challenge for any rabbi who does not want to get involved in politics. Rabbis who are embracing, either on the left, but at least in our Orthodox circles, on the right, unfiltered, unmuted, enthusiastic, unnuanced support of Donald Trump are, the fact is, polarizing the community, driving young, modern Orthodox Jews out of the community in a way that is irresponsible. Donald Trump is one thing. You can hold your nose and vote for him. The triumphalism, the internalization of Trumpism, which is a kind of a crass defiance of rules and respect, is a disaster for Orthodox community, which will be shattered in many ways after this election. And that's looking at it positively.
Great. Sivan, did you want to say something there?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for your fascinating words. I know this discussion happens here in Israel too. I want to explain something. Trump is not my rabbi, okay? He's not my rabbi. And when I'm looking for a spiritual leader, it's okay. I want to text him when I have a philosophical, moral, halachic question. It's okay. But there's another Jewish value called hakarat hatov, being thankful for someone who did good things for you for 4 years. And he was very, I would say, in a way, he didn't stop for a minute working for the state of Israel, looking how to help us in so many cases, and despite the circumstances and what the world said. So there is a hakarat hatov, and there's also, I would say, the personality. And in a way, I think to be Jewish means to understand the conflicts, and to understand the situation is complicated. Okay, I see those Hasidic people with that enthusiasm. It's funny, okay, they can't even quote on their magazine some of the words he says, okay? He's not the Mashiach. It's very important to understand that we're all human, and the world is not so simple as we think. We thank him for what he does, but I just read an article here in Israel by a young Rav called Netanel Eliashiv from the settlement called Eli. It's in Judah and Samaria. I guess he supports Trump, but he also said to his students, his pupils, I do not educate you. That's not the right way to treat women or people with disabilities. And that's not the right way when you text, on Twitter, when you tweet, that's not the right, I would say, atmosphere we want to create on social media. And it's okay. For hundreds of years, we were much more sophisticated than now. So it's okay to be balanced. But I want to add something else, because during our year in the States, I wasn't allowed to even speak about Trump in certain places. And now I discuss the other extreme part of Jewish communities. Sometimes I was invited to certain places and they said, don't even mention the T word. I was like, Torah, what do you want? The T word is Trump. It's like saying, Voldemort. You can't even pronounce the name in certain places. And okay, I didn't mention the name, but I think you should heal something in your society if you can't even discuss politics, if you can't disagree. Okay, what's the problem? You have people in your community who think you have different opinions. It's okay. The fact you can't even talk about it, it made me sad, because in Israel, no one will tell me, don't mention the B word, BB, guns. We speak about everything, maybe, too much, but everything is open. And it's frightening to see a society that can't even speak in one family. Sometimes, even in families that invited us, shh, no, we don't speak about it. What is it, a bomb? What happened? No, don't even open that subject. Okay, I think it's, in a way, it's a problem.
If I could just add, I mean, I greatly appreciate everything Rabbi Robinson said, and I think our community rabbis, and this might be the case in a different way in the UK, but certainly the United States, that the community rabbis really have perhaps the most important work ahead of them in the next several months in the aftermath of this election, however it turns out, to try and, there's the COVID virus, and there's no question that our community has been infected by the kind of polarization and lack of appreciation of nuance and respect. And the other thing I can point viewers to, if they want, is to go to the OU website, and we have a new executive vice president of the OU, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, who his first piece that he wrote in the Jewish Action magazine, which you can also find on the OU's website, it was about how we, being Jewish, among other things, is an appreciation of nuance. And as Sivan just said, and we need to be able to sit together and talk together even when we're disagreeing. The only thing I would add on top of that is, it's really bad politics for the community to be so identified in this way. First of all, the Democrats might win. Second of all, even if Trump wins, there are a whole bunch of things that we still need to work with Democrats in Congress at the national level for. Oh, and by the way, most Orthodox Jews in the United States live in states or cities that are overwhelmingly run by Democrats and are going to be run by Democrats for a very long time. So again, you have to appreciate, whether it's in Sivan's terms, Hakarat HaTov, or the other. I'm not saying anybody should sacrifice, principles that they're committed to and policies that they're committed to, and voting for candidates, certainly at the presidential level, who are doing that. But it wasn't only Trump who saw the video, possibly, of people marching around in Borough Park with Trump flags. The Democratic governor of New York, the Democratic mayor of New York City, the Democratic senator who's the Senate Democratic leader and might be the Senate majority leader, all saw that, and it's sending a message of, oh, we're not part of your coalition, so you don't really need to be responsive to us because we're not going to vote for you anyway. It's just clumsy, to say the least, politics.
Although what it also emerges, without drilling down too much into this, is also, these kind of things are happening in the ultra-Orthodox community to a large extent because of kind of a breakdown of authority as well. It's an emergence of, if you like, of a street politics mentality. Mm-hmm. None of the Rabbonim in Borough Park or endorsed, or certainly no respectable rabbis endorsed those what was effectively a riot in Borough Park over COVID restrictions, and allied with a tremendous amount of Trump support as well. And it represents a kind of a younger generation that also within, there's an element of the Orthodox community, all parts of it, needing to address its moral leadership. As I mentioned before, there are many members young members of the modern Orthodox community who cannot respect anybody who is not in their own political lane. And that's a huge, shift, and it points to kind of a breakdown of the respect for the kind of institutions and leaders that, as Nathan alluded to, we're going to need to kind of stitch ourselves back together again.
I would certainly, it would be wrong of me if I didn't recommend to the viewers Rabbi Sachs's latest book called Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times. And he has several chapters about politics and liberal democracy and the challenges that it faces in divisive eras as we've got at the moment. But I want to sort of pick up on what you just said and kind of begin to wrap the conversation up. I'm conscious of everyone's time. You know, every presidential election campaign seems to always have an eye 4 years onto the future. So if we're looking both from within Israel, you know, or within America, you have leaders who have either been around for a long time or who Biden, I think, by the end of a potential first term, or even Trump, yeah, they're going to be 80 plus. These are not young people anymore. So I guess the question is, both within Israel and within America, who are the next generation of rising stars in the political scene who may or may not kind of come to the fore over the next sort of couple of years or so? I don't know who wants to start. Nathan.
I mean, the you know, on the American scene, you know, obviously the first tier are all those other folks who ran for the Democratic nomination, whether it's Cory Booker or Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar, who's relatively young. You know, that's sort of going to be the next level. Obviously, Kamala Harris, if Biden and Harris are elected, she's younger and she will be the front runner for the Democratic nomination, whether it's in 4 years or 8 years. Although I would expect if it's in 4 years, like if Biden decides not to stand for a second term, I don't think that means that there's not a Democratic primary with people challenging Harris. But she would be obviously in a very strong position. On the Republican side, you know, you see already some younger conservative Republican senators like Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley are positioning themselves. Nikki Haley certainly is. There are some other governors, but the first thing that's going to happen, I mean, it'll happen simultaneously. There's going to be a civil war in the Republican Party if Donald Trump loses. There's going to be a group of folks who are going to try to, for lack of a better term, you know, capture his coalition and sort of position themselves as the people to lead, you know, his voters into the next campaign. They might position themselves as, you know, you're going to get all the good stuff of Donald Trump without the crazy tweets. But there's definitely going to be a faction that's going to want to do that. And then there's clearly a faction which is, you know, right now organized around groups like Republican Voters Against Trump and the Lincoln Project and these other folks who are, as their name says, you know, they are longstanding people in the Republican Party who just are offended by Trump and are actively campaigning against him and supporting Biden, who are going to try to use a Donald Trump defeat as a repudiation of Trumpism and that whole approach, and are going to try to get their folks. And, you know, you think about, I don't know if necessarily he would run again, but people like Mitt Romney, Governor Larry Hogan from Maryland, you know, and others who are going to try to bring the Republican Party, so to speak, back to a more, you know, George H.W. Bush, you know, kind of like, you know, version of the Republican Party. So that war is going to be going on if Trump goes down, which is going to, depending on that turns out, is going to very much impact who their nominee would be in 4 years. And by the way, we should not ignore the fact that if Biden loses, you know, there's also going to be a whole, you know, it's so you tune in now and people, the commentators, the pundits all say, oh, Biden's ahead. You know, he was the perfect candidate for this moment because he's calm and he's from working class Pennsylvania, so he can appeal to these, you know, to peel off a segment of the white voters that Trump got 4 years ago. You know, if Biden loses, all these pundits are going to have to turn around and explain why Biden was such a flawed candidate, not the perfect candidate. You know, so there'll be a whole reckoning there if that occurs as well.
And Sivan, within Israel, can you see beyond the Bibi, or do people not look that far?
I think there are hundreds of people waiting, you know, for both post Bibi era to arrive. And yeah, so many people, they are already 60 and they're considered young because they wait, for the right timing. But he's still here, and he's elected every time. We have inside the Likud party, we have Gilad Ardan, and we have Israel Katz, and we have Gideon Sa'ar, obviously. Outside of the Likud, we have Naftali Bennett, who's very successful right now, and Ayelet Shaked with him. We also have more to the left, Yair Lapid, and we have Gantz. Maybe he will run again. I'm not sure. And we see new voices inside the Haredi world. I really believe the young generation there can create something new. And in the Arab-Israeli world, whenever I speak to young Arabs here in Israel, I hear different things than I hear from their official political leaders. I hope something good will happen there. I believe that COVID-19, that challenge we're all facing together, should create new language of solidarity. Because while you're speaking here about the American system, all I'm looking at are the new numbers from the Ministry of Health. Every day, that's the main headline in the whole world. And we all struggle together. And what we need now is solidarity and new voices in Israel, in America. I wonder why it didn't happen yet. I think that thing should change us. I mean, we all fight together. And I wonder why you don't see this solidarity yet. I believe it will appear, Bezrat Hashem. By the way, the situation in Israel is much better now. You see what's going on in Europe. I know what's going on now in London, Dan. Hashem, we reopen many places now in Israel, the shuls and the schools, and the numbers are, by the way, today, live. They're good. I mean, you see the decline, but nobody knows, if I don't want to, predict. I think this thing teaches us, to be much more humble and, careful when we speak about the future. Who knows?
I think, look, I completely agree. And I think that's a brilliant message to finish this conversation. I'd like to thank you all, Nathan, Sivan, Rabbi Robinson, for your time. I've certainly found it a very insightful, enlightening conversation. I hope the viewers have as well. I'm going to go and get some snacks and some caffeine to help me through the night, and I'll probably flick between CNN and Fox News, and one will declare one the winner and the other will declare the other the winner, and no one will know what happens in the morning, and all I would have done is lost a night's sleep.
What channel from Yerushalayim? Channel 12.
Channel 12, obviously. Always Channel 12. Always. Behemet. Okay, Yopi, thank you very much. Kol tov, toda rabah, and everyone be well and stay safe.